My name is Lulu. I am Meta Peace Team's fundraising coordinator. Even though you can't see them, Melody is also in the background supporting this program. I am very grateful to be here today with you on this Giving Tuesday. Since I've joined Meta Peace Team, I've met so many wonderful people and have found Meta Peace Team is not just an organization. Meta Peace Team brings people together as a community, as a family, and as a team, all working together for a more just world. As you know, today is Giving Tuesday. This is our first Giving Tuesday doing a big event, and we couldn't be happier. We are at $4,055 of our $5,000 goal. If we reach $5,000, we'll be able to provide 20 scholarships for students to be trained in nonviolence. We would love it if those of you who are joining us either right now or in a video later would consider making a donation today. Donations can be made either through the link in the chat or through Facebook. So this evening I'm going to be joined by two wonderful storytellers. Give me just 1 second. We will be joined by Julie and Mary. To start off, Julie Thomas-Beckett is a trainer with Meta Peace Team and is committed to active nonviolence. She is the author of The Work of Nonviolence, Story from the Frontline, and incorporates these stories during presentations on the skills and tactics of nonviolence in our everyday lives. She lives with her husband and works as a family nurse practitioner in East Lansing, Michigan. We also have Hanna. Hanna has been the operations manager for Meta Peace Team since 2005. She also coordinates MPT's Violence De-Escalation Skills Training Program and the MPT Internship Program. Mary worked as a counselor/case manager for community mental health for 20 years with an ongoing focus on why people do the things they do and what they are, in effect, communicating. In 2005, she left community mental health to work full-time for nonviolent conflict transformation. As a member of MPT, Mary has served on both international Palestine-Israel, Tijuana, U.S.-Mexico border, and domestic within the United States peace teams, often anchoring the domestic teams. She's the state coordinator for Pax Christi, Michigan, and was one of the founding members of the Shantae Sena Network. And I can let you all introduce yourselves as well. You guys can come into frame. I know I've been hogging it.
Yes, this is a high-level production where it's BYOC, bring your own chair.
BYOC. Beautiful. Hi.
Hello! Fancy meeting you here.
Yeah,
how are you?
Good.
To see you.
I'm ready to tell stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. You go first if you want.
Mary and I just had dinner together, and I was kind of thinking about that, like what to say. I've got a little list of stories, but one that was really impactful, and I just want to share that. It has to do with my mom and my dad, and my dad just passed a couple months ago, so I'm kind of like really grateful for this story. So. It was, the first part of it was kind of about my failure in my ability to do the Clara method. And I often tell this story when I do presentations just as an illustration of what Clara can look like and what it often doesn't look like. Because I think it's important to know that we're all still learning. I know that I am, and I think that practicing these skills helps us be better. And I often say that I fall on my face and skin my nose, and I get back up and I try it again. So there was a time I was home in Jackson visiting my parents, and it was right before the election in 2020. And so I shared some of my views and asked my parents what their views were, and they're very different than mine. And so I just listened and didn't say much because I really wanted to make a space for the listening. And I was glad I had a mask on to like hide the gaping mouth that I felt like, oh. And so after a while, my dad said, people just need to get back to God. And so I was like, by then I'd kind of like been just pummeled by these thoughts and views. And I said kind of quickly, well, Dad, that just doesn't work for some people. And I basically shut down the whole conversation because I didn't give him any room to share about why and what that meant to him. So I thought, okay, fall on the nose, skin the nose, get back up, and I was hoping that I would get another opportunity. Well, January 6th happened, and the insurrection and the attack on our capital, and so shortly after that I went to Jackson to see my parents again, and we were chatting about the events at the Capitol on the 6th and what that means for our country and our values and everything. And again, my dad said, people just need to get back to God. He's very consistent. So instead of reacting and doing the rah-rah method of reacting and adding information, I took a deep breath. So I did the claw, la la la, in the Clara method, and I just said, I took a deep breath to kind of center myself, and then I paused and I said, what would that look like, Dad? What would that look like to you? And then what followed was this amazing conversation, this back and forth interaction between him and I about community, about caring for people other than ourselves, about being accountable to people other than just ourselves, and kind of a responsibility in our communities, and it was really a beautiful interaction with him, and we could agree on all of those things. And so we really found this incredible common ground, and I just knew at the moment that I'll never ever forget this.
Mm-hmm.
I had this moment with my dad of really connecting with him on a really interpersonal level that was deeper than most of our connections, and I knew at that moment it would be something I would treasure forever, and so now I still do. So that Clara was successful. So
Yeah, and then it's a really powerful, compassionate, like, interaction that you guys were able to have.
Mm-hmm.
Clara, for anybody who may not be familiar, stands for centering yourself, listening, affirming, and then, if the conversation takes you that way, responding to what they're saying and adding information. But it's really about not winning an argument. It's about being present to the other person and then having a genuine conversation. And so I love that
Mm-hmm.
was
That's
able.
what happened.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And we often talk about in trainings, that Clara, we can break that up into la la versus rah rah. So the la la part is really listening, and then affirming or aligning that common ground with that other person. And that takes a lot of really
Mm-hmm.
conscious listening to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I stayed in the la la and didn't rush to the response and the adding information, which is the rah rah part.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's hard to quiet that mind, because I think that's an automatic kind of like almost a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Like, gotta get that out there just in case I don't get another chance, But sitting back and just listening and kind of like breathing into that, relaxation into that was, it really yielded a very special moment that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah.
If I would have just responded.
I love that
again.
you did this, which in sign
Mm-hmm.
language means we think the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's what alignment is.
Yeah.
So yeah, great.
Well, I've picked out a bunch of stories that are really different from the stories that I usually tell, like in training and stuff, so that people get to hear something different. But before I tell the first one, I do want to take just a moment to recognize the students that were shot today in Oxford, Michigan. I don't know if everyone's heard that. My understanding is that 3 students are dead. 2 or 3 more may be hospitalized, I'm not sure. For 6 total, I think. And then the shooter was a 15-year-old boy. So having that be the preface to this conversation just really brings home to me how really important it is that we get these communication and violence de-escalation skills out more. So the stories that we're telling are just examples of different people using different ways to curtail what could have exploded into potentially violent situations. And there's so many of them that it just adds verification to what the research has already said, which is that it works. So I'm praying for those families and all the families, and those who have died, those who were wounded, and the boy that did the shooting. You know, we don't know his story, and we need to know each other's stories. Which means we need to listen, which is part of what Julie was just talking about. All right, so these are going to be some far-flung stories that some of you may have heard, some of you may not have, but I love the idea of thinking outside the box. That's one of the beautiful things about nonviolence, is that it's not prescriptive. It's not like you must do A, B, C, D. It's like you really get to be creative. And so one of the things that I loved hearing about is there was in the South, and I want to say it was Mississippi, but I cannot swear to it, but they had the Adopt a Highway program. You know, I'm sure you all have seen those. This stretch of highway has been adopted by this organization, the Rotary, or, you know, the Lions or something. And so by law, any group can adopt a section of highway once it comes up for adoption. And so the KKK adopted a section of highway. And so the community at large was like livid and didn't know what to do and wanted to fight it in court, and you know, legally they had a right to adopt it. So they thought outside the box, and they created a petition and a drive, and they changed the name of the highway to the Rosa Parks Highway. So the KKK is cleaning the Rosa Parks Highway. And I don't know if the KKK decided to stick with it, but the beauty of their thinking, like, how can we do this differently and make a statement, is just, I think, a really powerful thing.
Yeah. So the name is bigger than who cleans it.
Yes.
Who sponsors that part of the highway.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you. I think that's great. There's some nice symmetry there. But they get what they deserve. So yeah, good. Love it. I have another Clara story, and this happened to me at my office. I work as a family nurse practitioner, seeing patients, and COVID has been really hard. I feel like I'm on in a MASH unit. You know, seeing the effects. I'm not on the front lines because I'm not in the ER and I'm not in a COVID ward, but I'm in a primary care office and I see the fallout of COVID every day. It's like being in the car wash with the windows down. But it was the fall before we had the vaccine, so it was the fall of 2020, and a woman came in. It was a white woman who came into the office, and she was absolutely livid for having to wear a mask, and she refused to wear it, and they let her in, which they're not supposed to, but she was in the room, in the exam room, and my medical assistant came out and said, she's really mad. So I got ready. I got my N95 on. I always wear goggles and my little, what I call my potato chip bag. It's that crinkly blue, thing over my clothes. And anyway, so I went in fully PPE'd and sat as far away from her in the room as I could. And she was not wearing a mask, and her body language was mad. So she's sitting there. I hate wearing these masks. You know, I work from home. I'm working from home right now, and I hate working from home. Work used to be my social life, and I just hate working from home. She said it's just this stupid virus from China anyway, and it's just killing old people. So there's 1 million babies killed every year from abortion, and no one says a word about that. But I just hate wearing these masks. And I'm so glad the governor's rulings got overturned and finally, businesses can reopen and we can get back to normal. And she was just spewing out all of these mistruths and anger, and it was just like spewing out of her. And in my mind, I was like, Clara. How do I do Clara? C-L-A-R. So I have all these letters in my head, and so then I just kind of tried to all right, take a deep breath and just listen for the emotion behind what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And I just kept going back to the point that she sounded angry, for one. That was really obvious. But behind that sounded like it was loneliness, because she's so used to working with all of these people, mm-hmm. and suddenly she's isolated at home behind a mask and not able to do the things that she wanted to do. And she was pissed about that, but it was really about the loneliness. So I had to really consciously quiet my response mode, refuting all of her angry claims. I wanted to address them, but I thought, no, let's just stay with the listening, and I'm listening, I'm hearing you, and I hear loneliness. So after all of that, I took a deep breath and I said, I know this is hard, and I know this is lonely, mm-hmm. and I'm sorry that it's hard, and I'm sorry that it's lonely, but I'm here wearing all this stuff so that I can be here, and I'm here wearing all this stuff so that you can be here. And we're asking people to wear their mask. I'm asking you to wear your mask to protect my staff and their families, so that we can do this and be here for our patients. So I felt like at first she was in this non-thinking zone. She was just mad, rage. And I could feel her sort of kind of coming into the thinking zone, and that's when I kind of entered into the, okay, so I hear you, I hear your loneliness, but then I also added that piece about wearing my mask so you can be here kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm honestly going to need you to put your mask on when I do your exam and get into your little orbit, but I need you to put your mask on. And she did. And then it was just an interesting visit, because she didn't want to talk about anything about her health either, and there were some things about her health that needed to be addressed which she didn't want to address. So I'm kind of not really sure why she came in, other than it was maybe a little bit of a social visit.
Well, maybe you gave her exactly what she really did need, which was someone that listened.
Somebody to hear her loneliness.
Yeah.
So she left the room, but she didn't put her mask on as she walked past the staff, but she kept the piece of paper in front of her mouth, which I thought was respectful. So she didn't come in again for a year, and I just saw her again. And she's still angry, but she was able to hear, and we were able to find a way to discuss her health issues, which were concerning. And at first she was really off-putting, didn't want to listen, didn't want to hear it, but as I just kept listening to her and hearing her and honoring what I was hearing from her, she kind of okay, I'll do this, but I'm not going to do that, mm-hmm. I'll meet you a quarter of the way, and I'm I'll take it.
Yep.
That's fine. Let's just go there. And so it was, I'm really grateful for her, and I'm grateful for that, that opportunity to experience that firsthand. It was really, really hard, though. I remember feeling just really shook up about it afterwards. To be met with that much rage and that much anger is scary. Mm-hmm. And I never felt like I was at risk or she was going to pull a knife on me or anything like that, but there was just so much rage and so much anger and so much hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that hurt comes from, and I feel like in some ways I'm planting little bits of seeds that maybe I'll be able to reap as future visits happen, that maybe she'll share a little bit more with me. She shared some things with me this time that she hasn't shared before, and I maybe understand that there's some real hurt going on in her life from a long time ago. So it's just kind of, I think, I've heard it said, I think by Oprah actually, but you said it today, that that maybe we need to ask people, instead of what's wrong with you, what's happened to you? what's hurt you,
Mhm.
and maybe allowing them the space to put words on that, if they will.
Yep.
And being patient enough to let that happen as well. Yeah,
Very good.
those are my Clara stories.
Very good. Well,
Nothing like learning on the ground.
yeah, the hard way.
Yeah, the hard way.
Trial by fire.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a story about when I was in the West Bank. We were in a small village called Baleen. And Baleen has made their livelihood from their olive groves. Some of these trees are like hundreds and hundreds of years old. I was in Bethlehem, and there was a tree there outside of the shepherd's field that was bearing fruit. It was still alive. It was bearing fruit at the time of Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah, so these trees are not just trees to them, nor are they just like a form of sustenance, or income from harvesting and selling the olives or olive oil, but they're like family members. And so in Baleen, every Friday, they would have this nonviolent protest, walking up to where the government of Israel was building the separation wall, which is also referred to as the apartheid wall, and illegally confiscating more and more of their land so that they could literally confiscate those olive groves, and then they would destroy the trees, which was heartbreaking. As I said, not just because they were losing their livelihood, but because they were losing someone who had been with their family for generations to help provide for them. So at the end of this protest, as happens every Friday, despite the fact that it's nonviolent, the Israeli military wants it to end, doesn't want to have talks or negotiations at the line where the fence is. So they usually start out with tear gas and shooting tear gas at everyone, and then rubber bullets, which is a misnomer because they're steel bullets coated in rubber, which just means it's harder for it to penetrate your skin. But if it hits you in the temple, you can die. So one of the things that happens is, especially the little kids that they refer to as the shabab, which just means youth, these little kids have seen their parents lose their homes, lose their livelihoods, lose everything.
Dignity.
And so, dignity, exactly. And so a lot of times the little boys will throw stones at the soldiers. Now, the soldiers are in full, like, ninja gear. They have the protective vests on and helmets and, automatic weaponry. Yeah, exactly. But what we had heard is that there was like a rumor going around at the time that the soldiers would come in at night into the different villages and arrest the children who had thrown the stones, and then they would take them and terrorize them, tell them that they're going to spend the rest of their lives in jail or they'll never see their parents again or whatever, and then just let them go somewhere in the West Bank. Kid doesn't have a phone, parents don't know where he is, and like, how do they so it was a real form of terrorism that parents were experiencing, but the Israeli government insisted that did not happen, that they would not do that. And so just so happened that on this night after the protests at the wall, we were sleeping on the floor of a teacher in town, so that because we were headed to a different part of the West Bank to help shepherds who had their sheep being poisoned by settlers. So that's where we were headed next. So we were just supposed to spend the night there and then head further south towards Hebron. And we were sound asleep, and at about 2:30, 2:33 maybe in the morning, there's all these whispers like around you, And people are like, the soldiers are coming, the soldiers are coming, the soldiers are coming. So people are getting up. And why are the soldiers coming? And so we all go out. Well, this village, I mean, we're talking old school village, no street lights, no paved roads. These is like gravel, not even gravel, like chunks of rock. And my teammate Annette like links her arm into mine so that we can like run to see what's happening and not fall.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, the soldiers had come with a jeep, and they were at the outskirts of town. There was like a 7-year-old boy that they were there to arrest, and they were at this little boy's house with his parents. But the village had seen the headlights of the jeep, and so the word went up. Well, the soldiers didn't know that like MPT was there. We had like 17 members, 18 members there. We all rushed along with the other villagers, and there were internationals there, and we all went to the house. Well, the soldiers were like shocked, like where did they come from? Mm-hmm. And so they didn't know what to do, so they jumped back in their jeep and they charged us with the jeep, and nobody moved. And they charged us again, and nobody moved. So they didn't know what to do, so they went out of the village and went up to the top of the hill so that we could see their headlights, and they were joined by another jeep. And they sat there for a while. And so the father of the house, we ended up having this conversation that was like a 6-way conversation, because the father spoke a tiny bit of English, Arabic, and a tiny bit of Hebrew. And his brother spoke fluent Hebrew, no English, fluent Arabic. But there just so happened to be a filmmaker in the town who was doing a documentary who caught all this on film, proving that indeed the military is doing this. Mm-hmm. And so the father of the house said, as soon as you leave my yard, they will come and take him. Mm-hmm. And we said, then we won't leave. Mm-hmm. And so he had another son, older, who was paralyzed from the neck down. He had been shot by an Israeli sniper in the neck when he was at a nonviolent protest in Ramallah. But because he was paralyzed, it took down some of the barriers of sleeping on the floor in his room. And so they put mats down, which means they didn't have beds. These mats were their beds. So we were like on their beds all night long listening. Like every time the goat bleated, and every time like, is that them, is that them, is that them? And finally, the sun creeps up, and they had left. The jeeps were gone. And so we felt really guilty, because we knew we were committed to going down to Hebron to help the shepherds, and we had to leave. And the parents were like, no, you must wait. You must have breakfast with us. These people were so poor. The house was very simple, and the kitchen was not inside the house because that would make the house too hot. It was in a separate shed, and what they would do is they would take goat dung and light it on fire, put rocks over it. The rocks would heat up, and then they would put something on top of the rocks to cook. And they wanted to make it a celebration, because even though they knew we were leaving, they wanted to celebrate one night of knowing that they weren't alone, that they were seen, that someone else in the world cared. And so the mom made pita bread, but she wanted it to be special, because at this point our entire celebratory breakfast consisted of olives, really, really like strong tea, and pita bread. Yeah. And she took off the shelf this little packet of paper that was twisted at the top, and she untwisted it, and in it she had kept sugar. Oh, yeah. And she took the sugar and she sprinkled it on top of the pita bread to make it sweet, so that it was indeed a celebration. And that moment taught me so much about what it means to be there for people, even if it only gives them a temporary reprieve. Like, every penny I spent fundraising to get there, if all I did was give them a few hours of not having to worry about their child disappearing, was worth it. And there's certain things that we always do on teams. We always try and create a peaceful presence. We always, do human rights recording, which now this videographer made that possible. Recording what really happened and being able to report that. We were literally unarmed bodyguards for this child, and when the Jeep was charging us, we were interpositioning our bodies between, we stopped them physically. And to know that all the training I got made it possible for them to have a few hours of peace, and it made every moment of that opportunity worth it, to give them that tiny bit of peace, and to know that I would always be devoted to creating more of those opportunities for other people to do. So
I remember when you first told me that story, and I think it has touched your heart to the point that you can't remember it without
I know, without crying.
having emotion come to your face and your eyes and your heart, and I think I've been impressed forever that your commitment to this work, and I think that's maybe where it comes from, it's in your heart. It's really part of who you are. And
I think when you see you can make a difference, I mean, that's the beauty of what we do. When you see you can make a difference, how can you not do it?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put a plug in because that story is in the book. The Work of Nonviolence, Stories from the Frontline. It's tons of stories like that of this work and how it works on the ground and how it impacts people on the ground in a real and lifelong way. So I appreciate hearing that story. I can hear the gravel under the tires, and just the fear that brings in, but also the resolve that we have tools and we're going to use them and we're going to protect this family while we can.
Yep.
And I think that's impressive. So, I have.
I'm going to cut in for
we
just
have
a second.
Commercial break.
Just 1 second. Yes, as this commercial donation break.
Here,
As
again.
there we go. Hi everyone. Lulu again. I'm back. For any donations of over $75, after this point, you can get a book for. So consider that as you try to help us. Signed
autographed book
by the author.
Yep. So
I signed
that.
a bunch in preparation for this day. So
Woohoo!
give $75 and you get this book with my signature, which take or leave it.
Okay,
The
great
stories are better than my signature, but the stories are good. So, and there's so many. I mean, I got to interview. I feel very privileged in having had the time to sit down with Peter Doherty and hear his stories and tape record his voice and feed him. So many great moments around my kitchen table. I treasure them, and just interviewing Mary and Kim Redigan and Sherry Wander and Elliot Adams and just so many people, Dwight Washington and Katie Ames, just all kinds of people that are part of this work. Many who I didn't get to interview too, that have been part of this work for decades before I arrived on the scene. And but all working so in such a committed way to justice and to humanity, and to just know that these skills work and they're possible to learn. We are working with some school districts, one in particular, to maybe look at getting some of this into the classroom and maybe into some curriculum issues, so that we can start when kids are young, we have so much. We were talking about that today. There's so many things that we have the language of violence every day. We see it, we hear it. It's in our music. It's on Facebook.
Video games.
It's on video games. It's on social media. It's on our TV. It's blaring all day long, and that's what kids learn, and that's what they know, and that's how they respond. Like, that's their modus operandi. But I think that we need to start in grade school with talking with kids about the language of emotion, so that we get to feel a sense of knowledge and familiarity about what these emotions are and what they feel like, and what do we do with them when we have them. Some are hard, some are really fun, but how do we manage these? And then in middle school, to really talk about bystander intervention and what does that look like, and how can we have more effective communication with using iMessages rather than news statements, and really actively listening to develop those tools early on and practice them throughout their developing years. So then they're ready in their adulthood to be good citizens, good family members, good co-workers. These are skills for life.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of excited about the potential for that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that's where it goes.
Yep.
So my next story is just kind of a fun one. I remember hearing this in my travels with people and listening to their stories. And there was the Gay Pride March in downtown Lansing. Every year there's a very festive event where people can love who they love and walk in a parade and end up at the downriver and having a celebration. Sometimes there's union ceremonies on the steps of the Capitol, and it's just a real festive event. But every year on one certain corner there is a gathering of rather evangelical and fundamentalist preachers who are harassing and being less than kind to the people who are participating in the Gay Pride March, telling them that they're sinners and they're going to hell and all kinds of
They're into
hurtful,
bestiality. They don't know anything about love.
yeah, it's horrible, mean stuff. And so the celebrants of the parade and the event have to pass by this corner every year. And one year there was a gentleman whose son had died of AIDS, and he was grieving his son. And as he was walking past, the ministers screamed at him, "Well, your son didn't know love, and he's burning in hell," and all kinds of really hurtful things to this grieving man. And so the grieving man had, I think, had a little bit to drink and was angry
Because his son
this.
had died.
His son had died, and he was grieving, and so anyway, he started to kind of posture with a little bit of reactionary violence. And MPT was there, hip hip hooray, but also so was the police. And the police has a presence there, but they know that MPT is there as well. And one of the newer recruits for the police started to kind of move towards intervening in this sort of getting heated event. And the chief of police put his arm on the guy and said, "No, MPT will handle it." And so he put a pause on this new recruit guy who was like gung-ho on his baton and gonna go in and save the day. And he said, no, let MPT handle it. And MPT did. So what happened is one of the MPT members, they're wearing their big yellow vests that says Peace Team all over, you can't miss it. But she's like going up to the man who is grieving and kind of started engaging him in conversation about, "Tell me about your son. I'm sorry for your loss," and kind of like protective accompaniment, like guided him away. And then some other Peace Team people went up and started engaging the ministers, like, "Where in the Bible are you finding that? I don't know, I'm not familiar, can you tell me where you find this information?" And just kind of engaging them in a conversation, so very much distracting them away from this man. So just this gentle skill of distraction for one, but also interpositioning to kind of like keep this escalation from happening and ending in some kind of violence. Whether it was already violent in word, we just didn't let it escalate to a violent deed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a wonderful example of the work of nonviolence. And another story, I'm sorry if I'm yammering too much, but another story from this, event. Same kind of event, there was some people passing by these ministers, and they started singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know," and the ministers were just outraged at that, like, how dare you, Jesus doesn't love you, and you're a sinner, and all kinds of stuff, and so you can't sing that, and so one of the MPT members said, "Sing? Are we gonna sing?" And she kind of interrupted everybody and started singing, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And of course, everybody starts clapping their hands and stomping their feet and doing the whole, run around with that song, because you can't help but do that when you hear that song. But it really, just totally distracted the moment, because it could have been one of those things that could have been, tense. But instead, it's just that quick, creative. I love how Kim Redigan says that nonviolence is creative, it's bold, and it's active. Nothing passive about this work, So, but it does take that patience and that, creativity to think on the spot, and just, there's more tools than a hammer for these problems.
Yep.
So
I also love that in both of those circumstances, not only did it not escalate to physical violence, but it also kept people out of the criminal justice system.
Oh yeah.
Which,
right.
As we all know, has its own leanings, and how much money you have in your bank account dictates how well you're going to do in the court system a lot of times, and what color your skin is dictates how well you're going to do. So being able to keep people out of that and help them buy enough time to regather and come back from a better place in themselves is also just a really wonderful part of doing this work.
Yeah.
Right, so I will tell another story. I mean, we're trying to give a really broad expanse of all different ways of being nonviolent, and thinking outside the box really matters. And so I love that there was a town in I want to say Oregon, and a Jewish family had put a menorah in the window for Hanukkah, which often overlaps with the Christmas season, and vandals threw rocks through the window and destroyed the picture window and the menorah that was in it. And the community responded by everyone putting menorahs in their windows.
Oh, I love that.
And so it was this sign of solidarity and compassion and community that probably for the first person that was willing to put that menorah in their window afterwards took some courage, but courage is contagious. And so they all went up, and the newspaper in that town printed a menorah so that people could put it in their windows, and it was just a beautiful way of answering violence with love.
Yeah. What a statement.
Yep.
I love that. That's creative.
Yep.
And it's bold.
Yep. And now I'm going to tell one more story, because that one was kind of short, and I love this one too. Kim Redigan, one of our trainers for MPT, and a wonderful speaker, many of you may know her. She was driving down a street in Detroit, and she saw what was very literally two gangs of people who were looking like they were going to rumble, big fight, weapons and everything. And she was by herself in a car, and she thought, what am I going to do? And so she rolled down her window, and she said, that shows my age, I rolled the window down. But anyway, instead of roll the window down. But anyway, she yelled out the window, "Hey, you guys, you might get out of here! The cops are coming! The cops are coming!" Everybody broke up and left.
Wow, that's great.
And again, it was
She spoke their language.
yep, and she managed to buy them the time to
Yep.
get out of that mindset,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And we hope that when you have space, when you're not confronted with, you know, your own anger and frustration,
Mhm.
when you have a little bit of time, you can make wiser decisions.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I love the thermos story that you told me.
Go ahead.
You were probably thinking of that when you said people just need to have a little bit of time. They just need to have some time. So it was at the rally to it was at the
Right to work for less.
Right to Work for Less rally down at the Capitol in Lansing. And it was a really cold day. It was in January. It was when then Governor Snyder signed the legislation that basically gutted the ability for unions to collect dues from people. And so it really weakens the strength of the strength of unions. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people there who were protesting this legislation. And there was also people who were for the legislation from a wealthy business family in Michigan who had a little tent put up, and there was a person there, a white man who was just heckling these protesters for being stupid enough to be in a union, and he was provocative, and it was not good. And so there was a very angry woman who joined him and was kind of going tit for tat and yelling at him, and things were getting really heated on this cold day. And so MPT was there as well, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else.
It was Sherry.
It was Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
So Sherry went up to it was Sherry. I remember her telling the story. I remember how she told it. Anyway, I just love this. But so she went up to the woman and she's like, excuse me, and she puts her back to the guy, and the guy that was heckling her, and she goes, excuse me, I noticed your thermos, and I'm like always on this search for this really good thermos, and does your thermos keep your coffee warm? And the woman's like looking at her like, yeah, and she's trying to interact with this guy. And so then Sherry just kept asking her questions like, so where did you get it? And do you think they still have any? And how much was it? And what's the nearest bus for me to get to Meyer to buy this thermos? So she just kept interrupting her. And while she was doing that, there were other MPT members that were going up to this guy who was like going to be killed by somebody because he kept harassing all these people, and they like said, I think you ought to leave now. So they protectively accompanied him away from the fray while Sherry was interrupting this woman and engaging about this thermos. And eventually the woman like understood what Sherry was doing, and she's like, all right, enough already. Take the damn thermos if you want it so badly. Just take the damn thermos. So she just shoved the thermos in Sherry's arms, and then she said under her breath, and I wasn't going to hit him anyways. But I just love that story because, for one, it kind of illustrates that MPT stopped something potentially violent.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll never know because we didn't see it happen. But we helped keep a person that we may not agree with safe. And we also helped a woman buy some time to de-escalate so that she didn't make a bad decision and punch his lights out. Or
with a metal thermos.
Or throw her really hot coffee because it's in such a good thermos. She didn't throw the coffee on this guy and burn his face. So there's a lot of things to be gained from this wonderful story. So anyway, I just love the creativity of that. And it's not like MPT stood around in a little huddle and said, what should we do? It was just like, there needs to be some help over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the more often we are aware and paying attention and being creative about what can I do, and sometimes it's just singing happy birthday, or, asking questions about what time is it, how do I get to the bus,
interrupt the energy,
interrupt it.
Yep.
So it makes people stop and think for a minute.
Yep.
So.
And I love that a lot of times people will say, well, nothing happened,
right,
like violent innocent. Well, nothing happened because our whole job is to get there before something happens.
Yeah.
To try and de-escalate it before the something happens.
Right.
So it means we did well.
Yeah.
Right.
All
right. So I'm looking at our time. We have 5 more minutes.
Do you want to tell a last story?
I'll tell one last story, which I think is interesting. I know that this is one that Lulu helped disseminate too, but Elliot and I were doing a training in Troy, New York. And anyone who's done one of our trainings know that it's very practical, hands-on, practice the skills, role plays kind of thing. And so the last role play of the day was supposed to be, we always try and use something that resonates with the people who are in the training. And so they were really dealing with fracking in New York. And so they decided the role play was going to be, there were these workers trying to get to their job site to do fracking, and there were environmental protesters who were going to try and block the employees from going to the site. And then there were going to be the bosses who were like demanding that the workers work, and then there were going to be police that the bosses called in to be on the scene, and then there were going to be the peace team members who were there to try and chill everything out. And so all on their own, the people who were role-playing the nonviolent protesters decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to sit down in a line, we're going to link arms, and we're not going to move. Okay? That's their whole plan. Okay? So they knew they could get arrested. They knew that, there was, but no other actions. They weren't going to try and dismantle anything, or and so the peace team at first really didn't have anything to do until the bosses called in the cops. And when we're doing live role plays, we have all the props. So we have foam batons and plastic guns, and one person had like the face shield of a cop, and they wear the badges and everything. So they look as real as we can make them, no matter what role somebody's playing. And so these cops came in and just went crazy. They started beating them with the batons. These people have linked arms and are sitting on the ground not doing anything. They're being beaten with the batons. They're being tear gassed with fake tear gas canisters. They're being handcuffed. The peace team is trying to interposition to block them from arresting people and hurting them. Or shooting them, because one cop had his gun out. And so then we called stop at the end of the role play, and as we do, we ask each group to say, okay, stay in character. What were you experiencing? How do you feel? What were you thinking? So that we can get a real glimpse of what's happening in any scene. And we got to the cops and we said, what happened? I mean, we literally just said go, and from the moment you walked in, you guys were
violent,
way violent, and on people, just on them. And they talked to each other, and then one of them said, well, it occurred to us you wouldn't have given us all this equipment if we weren't supposed to use it.
Wow.
And the light just went on.
Yeah.
I mean, look how we militarize our police. And if they're not supposed to be using it, why are we giving it to them? And it just, everyone saw the irony of that very moment. And you think about what happens in Britain, where they don't, and the rates of violence and cops shooting others.
That's my phone.
Yep, way lower.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Anyway, that was just an aha moment kind of thing, and getting perspective, of how do we demilitarize our police and continue to arm with nonviolence the general public.
Well, that's the whole thing about if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail. If your only tool is a gun, you're going to use it for everything.
Everything's a target.
Everything you need. Every emotion that you have, every
I feel threatened, boom.
Yeah.
I feel scared,
Yeah,
boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so Lulu, we're going to turn it back over to you.
No, speak back in to say thank you both. You guys have done
Thank
amazing. Your stories are
Thank
wonderful, and if you guys have been inspired by some of the stories, check out Julie's book for donations of yes, wonderful. Oh my goodness. Her book is truly inspiring. I read it the other day, and I was just truly inspired. For donations of $75 and above, you guys will get it for free. So consider that. We are just about $1,000 off of our goal. For those of you who have just joined us or don't know, we're trying to raise $5,000. This will help us provide 20 scholarships to students to train them in violence de-escalation. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's with the help of all of you that this movement continues. So thank you all, and thank you to our wonderful storytellers as well. Bye.